I'm Autumn Lockett.
And this is Mitch Randall.
And you're listening to Good Faith Weekly.
Welcome to Good Faith Weekly. And on this episode, Autumn and I are going to catch up a bit, talk about the DNC and RNC that have taken place over the last couple of weeks. Also talk a little bit about just the heaviness that a lot of people are feeling right now. I addressed it in my article this week at goodfaithmedia.org, talking about the need for some light in our life and the need to create some light and hope in our world, and more specifically, our world, our individual world. So you want to check that out. So stay tuned, and we are also very, very pleased to have Rabbi Jack Moline as our guest today on the pod. Jack is the president of Interfaith Alliance, and he is just full of wisdom. So stay tuned for our interview with Jack. Autumn, you're sick. What's going on with you, girl?
I'm a little bit under the weather. I have an ear infection and I'm not 2 years old, so I don't really know how that works. So if you hear my voice sort of going in and out, and if you hear me say to Mitch, huh? It's just my ears, just ignore me. I just have to tell you that you made me a little bit sad in that introduction when you said that Rabbi Jack Moline was the president, and then you had a bit of a breath. And I was, wouldn't it be great if he was just the president?
Oh, hey, just take more of the pain meds that you've been prescribed, and he can be president. That's okay.
Since 2016, November 2016, I've been pretending that Jed Bartlett from The West Wing was president.
Oh, hey, did you see they're coming together on HBO? They're doing a reunion. Yes. It's not going to be an entire show, I don't think, but I think the cast of West Wing is coming back to encourage people to vote, and I think HBO is putting it together.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes, people who like West Wing should definitely vote.
Oh my gosh, one of my favorite shows of all time. Loved President Bartlett.
It was so fun. Yeah, I feel like we're feeling a little bit of the gloom that you mentioned in your article this week on Good Faith Media. Yeah. It's 5 months into this pandemic situation,
I just can't imagine.
No light on the horizon.
Right. And you know what's sad is that this now feels normative. Mm-hmm. For months it was very abnormal. For months it felt like, okay, this is going to be temporary. We'll get back to everyday life. And now it's hard for me to imagine, because in my job, I traveled a lot. It's hard for me to imagine going to the airport or, going to Washington, D.C. or Atlanta or Nashville or wherever we would, cover a story. And it's starting to kind of sink in that that's really sad that this is now normal. So we've got this large looming pandemic that is still pressing down upon us. Thank God that the cases are going down, deaths are going down, but it seems to have shifted focus a little bit. And the shift in focus is now hotspots with school returning. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that in campuses in Alabama and North Carolina and in other states. So it just
I'm sure next week we'll be saying in Norman, Oklahoma, since all the OU students came back last week.
Well, Autumn, I saw they cover their mouths when they sneeze and cough.
Not their nose.
No, they don't. They don't. So, but yeah, I do think it's going to continue. So we got this large looming, pandemic over us. Within this pandemic, this rise, this emergence of a social justice cry for racial justice in this country, with the death of so many Black individuals at the hands of police. Again, just this week, another shooting took place. Thank God he didn't die, but he's paralyzed in Wisconsin, shot in the back 7 times. And so, we've got that going on this week.
And 2 protesters shot.
Yeah, and 2 protesters shot exactly by a 17-year-old. We've got a hurricane barreling through Louisiana and Arkansas now.
Yeah, our family in Houston had to evacuate. Thankfully, we have like a family home south of Dallas, so they're safe with their little babies. But I mean, leaving your home and not knowing what you'll go home to with these storm surges.
Right, I know. I mean, just 20 miles inland storm surge. Just they're already saying it's the strongest hurricane that's hit Louisiana in a century.
But Mitch, doesn't it make you want to read Isaac Storm again?
Yes, that is a fabulous and heartbreaking book. For those of you who don't know, Eric Larson's book, Isaac Storm, details the huge hurricane that hit Galveston, Texas, over 100 years ago, and just a remarkable book. Highly recommend. Of course, Autumn and I recommend everything that Eric Larson has to say.
Right. And he's a good follow on Twitter too.
He is. We need to see if he'd want to be a guest on Good Faith Weekly. That'd be great.
Can you imagine? Yeah. Sorry, I just had every hurricane season. I want to reread that book. It's so good.
Yeah, it is very, very, very good. So we got the hurricanes, moving through, and then 2 hurricanes, one last week and one this week in the DNC and RNC. Just a reminder about how politically divided.
Hurricanes in their own right, really.
Exactly. So we've got all of this hanging over our head, and then just life, and it can become overwhelming. I was talking to my wife just the other day, just life, and it just is heavy. And Missy and I were talking the other day that it's just difficult. It just feels really heavy right now, and it's overwhelming, and we need a little hope.
Or some birds.
And for those of our listeners that remember, my birthday was a few weeks ago. I turned 50, and one of the best presents my family got me was a hummingbird feeder. And we actually started this autumn, as you well know, early on into the pandemic, but started kind of creating a little oasis for ourselves out in our backyard just to get out of the house. And we started planting some flowers and herbs around our swimming pool, and just kind of created this utopia for us to just go out and get lost in. And so when the family bought me a hummingbird feeder, I thought, hey, this is kind of cool. And so little hummingbirds would start to arrive each morning as I'd have my coffee and answer emails on the back porch. I thought, we can add to this. So I got some more bird feeders, and now I've got cardinals and blue jays and doves and butterflies all coming to greet me each and every morning. And my family likes to tease me that I went from 50 to 80 in a nanosecond. But hey, I'm fine with that. I'll lean into it. I'm okay. But it's just a little moment in the day that I just feel in tune with nature. And those little boogers just make me smile. And we all just need to smile a little bit. Give us something to smile. Everybody needs that in their life.
Absolutely. Another population of folks who are really suffering right now is our pastors. And we really, as congregants, need to make sure that we're a bright spot for them.
Yeah. Our pastor at North Haven Church, where Autumn and I attend, Jacob Topper, wrote a wonderful article for Baptist News Global last week, detailing a conversation that he had with several colleagues within ministry and the heavy burden that they were carrying during this time, to the point, which was shocking, that some of them had even contemplated taking their own lives. A lot of times I think we forget that the people who are charged with giving us hope, giving us peace and solace during this most difficult of times, are often neglected when it comes to caring for them. And so all of our clergy, our Christian ministers, our Jewish rabbis, our imams, all of our clergy who are caring for us, let's take some time this week to care for them, whether that is a simple note of encouragement, whether that is baking them a cake or pie, or just a phone call saying, hey, just wanted you to know we love you, we love your family, and we appreciate all you do for us. It goes a long way.
It really does.
Yeah. Well, I hope that everybody can find a little hope and light in their life. What's bringing you some hope? I know a lot going on in your life, but what's bringing you some hope and light in this world, this dark world of ours?
Well, you know, later in our interview with Rabbi Jack Moline, he'll talk about how the Jewish holiday season is approaching,
Mm-hmm.
and the Lockett family holiday season is approaching. So we kick off our birthdays on October 4th with my daughter's third birthday, and then basically the party doesn't stop until March. So we have birthdays, we have Thanksgiving, we have Christmas, and we love to celebrate. Like, we will celebrate, you know, a successful potty trip. We will celebrate just about anything. We keep champagne chilled and M&Ms ready to flow in this house. That's just how we are. And so I think, you know, your wife is kind of famous for saying, like, you have to have something to look forward to.
Yep.
And knowing that the holidays are coming and planning, you know, birthday cakes and treats and all those things is making things feel more normal to me, which is, I think, what we all want.
Good. Well, I'm glad you've got something to look forward to. You got a little hope and light at the end of the tunnel, and I just hope all of our listeners out there have something to look forward to. And if you don't, try to find something, try to create something that you can get away from all of the noise of the world, the chaos of the world, find some peace, find some solace, and find a hummingbird. They always will make you smile. Stay tuned as Autumn and I interview the president of Interfaith Alliance, Rabbi Jack Moline. Welcome back to Good Faith Weekly, and on this episode, we have a very special guest with us from our nation's capital, Rabbi Jack Moline. Rabbi Moline is the president of Interfaith Alliance. He has a career spanning decades serving and fighting for social justice and religious liberty all over this country, from Los Angeles to now Washington, D.C. He's a native of Chicago. He holds the title of Emeritus of Agudas Achim Congregation in Alexandria, Virginia, where he served there for 27 years. And we are absolutely delighted to have him on the pod today. Rabbi Moline, welcome to Good Faith Weekly.
Thank you, Mitch. I'm very glad to be here.
Well, for our listeners who may be unfamiliar with Interfaith Alliance, and I hope they're not, because they can find out about Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. Is that right?
Correct.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about Interfaith Alliance and the work you're doing.
Interfaith Alliance was founded a little more than 25 years ago, that paralleled the rise of the religious right as a political force. And we really adopted the mission of protecting faith and freedom. It's our motto and our mission. And keeping an eye on the constitutional issues regarding faith and the faith issues regarding the Constitution. We are firmly in the middle of the organizations that are constitutionally oriented, trying to keep religion and government out of each other's way, and the faith-based organizations that would like to see their rights to express themselves protected. So that's what we do. We're watchdogs, advocates, and allies of great organizations like Good Faith Media.
So what you're telling me, you just have nothing to do in this day and age, right?
I will tell you honestly, in November 2016, just before the election, we sat around trying to figure out what we were going to do when the election was over. And now I regret even asking that question.
Oh, I can't imagine the work but you're doing great work. You really are. So what are some of the most pressing issues that you're dealing with right now?
I would say the number one pressing issue for the faith community, Mitch, is paying attention. We are so distracted by what's going on from the White House and at the moment, because this is the week of the Republican convention, from the Republican Party, that we're not paying attention to legislative and policy decisions that are being made, I think, to the detriment of real religious freedom. There are two bills that are pending before Congress. They have support on one side of the aisle and much less support on the other side of the aisle. One is the No Ban Act that will prevent our government from excluding people from coming to the country on the basis of their faith or ethnic origin. And the other is the Every Child Deserves a Family Act that will prevent discrimination against foster and adoptive parents on the basis of their own faith or orientation. Both of those are incredibly important issues for the health and well-being of individuals and of our society, and they're opposed ferociously by some of the more right-wing groups in this country.
Jack, you mentioned obviously those two bills are very important, and what we're and hopefully they'll be passed and signed into legislation or signed into law. There does seem to have been this press, and those of us who have been in the midst of this have seen this coming for years and years now. But it certainly has culminated in the last decade or so and then expedited under this current administration, this redefining of religious liberty.
Yes.
Do you see that, and can you spell that out? What's going on with religious liberty today?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have taken to using the term true religious freedom rather than religious liberty, which has indeed been co-opted by the right. This all was initiated quite a number of years ago when the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed by Congress with the support of a coalition, right, left, and center of faith organizations that was designed to protect the rights of minority faiths to receive reasonable accommodations for their observances, the right of a Sikh man to wear a turban to work, the right of an Orthodox Jewish man to wear a kippah, yarmulke, when he's serving the military, for example, the right of a Muslim woman to keep her hair covered if that is her observance. But it was co-opted by people on the right who saw an opportunity to use it to enable them to discriminate with the permission of this Religious Freedom Restoration Act by claiming that their deeply held religious convictions superseded whatever the law of the land was. And that has been the fight ever since. That's what groups like the Family Research Council and Samaritan's Purse and other groups like that have taken as their mantra, that these are religious freedom issues that allow them to be exempted from civil rights and civil freedoms that apply to all Americans who don't share their convictions. That may or may not be all right in their personal practice, but when they try to impose that on employees, on school boards, on county councils, then it becomes a violation, in our opinion, of the Constitution, of both the Establishment Clause of the Constitution and the ability of people to access legal and endorsed services that are guaranteed to them by the government.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying is the original, what was the act that you mentioned?
Religious Freedom Restoration.
Yeah, the Restoration Act was originally intended to be non-discriminatory and allow people of faith to express their faith in public. And
ironically, the whole effort was generated by a Native American whose use of peyote was prohibited under drug laws, and he contended that it was a sacrament for him.
Right.
So the irony is that that the religious right is using what was an accommodation for something they would object to strongly,
sure,
in order to guarantee something that was not the intention of the original act.
Right. Well, I think you're exactly right. And what we're seeing across the country, and we've seen court cases settled now, the Hobby Lobby case, which is very frustrating for those of us that are living in Oklahoma, and the Green family and what they've brought to this country, as well as the Colorado cake case, the Baker case. And it just seems like more and more that the religious right, especially in this country, are trying to be more authoritative or authoritarian in their practice of faith on culture. It's what?
And they're being exploitive too, of these, they're finding sort of an in and just exploiting that to their own benefit, to the detriment of others.
So if I can say two things very briefly about that. The first is that I understand their concern. These are folks who have lived in a culture that has celebrated them as the majority and the default position for decades, if not hundreds of years, and they see that privilege slipping away, and they're afraid, and they want to shore it up. I understand that entirely, even if I don't agree with it.
Right.
Anyone who's lived in a minority knows what it means to be at the mercy of the majority.
Sure. And
they're feeling that shift. And the other thing I want to say about that is I and Interfaith Alliance defend their right 100% to decide that their deeply held religious convictions are going to govern their life.
Absolutely,
that is
100%.
what the Constitution guarantees and ought to guarantee. What it doesn't guarantee is imposing those beliefs on anybody else.
Right.
And coming back to the original point, I think because they've been used to those points being imposed for them, they are in something of a sense of panic, seeing that slip away, as if two men getting married or two women getting married somehow undermines the sanctity of a man and a woman being married in a faith tradition.
Very well said. And that is 100% accurate. And we really endorse everything that Rabbi Milling just said. Well done. So,
Good.
You know, the other big issue.
The place for the donation is interfaithalliance.org.
There you go. The other big issue that we're facing as a country is the racial justice. It's always reoccurring. It's always there. But certainly since the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the list just goes on and on. What are you seeing from your perspective of people of faith, a variety of faiths coming together to honestly address this particular issue?
Well, what I say may not be too popular with some of your listeners, Mitch.
Okay.
What I see is people of faith coming together to address the issues they've identified in other people's communities. It is a difficult thing for Jews to talk about the shortcomings in Jewish culture, Jewish society. It is a difficult thing for churches to address the segregation that is de facto, if not de jure, in church communities across the nation. It's an extraordinarily difficult thing, I can tell you, because I've talked with them about it, for Muslims to address the racism that exists within the Muslim community. It's much easier to point at a group of white supremacists or people who find themselves in positions of influence in this country who are white, male, and Christian and say, you have to change. So if there's anything that we can glean from each other, I hope it is listening carefully to the charges, the accusations, the observations that are being leveled against our home communities, and considering them very deeply and what we need to do in order to change. Because racism in this country isn't going to be eliminated by legislation, and it isn't going to be eliminated by investigating bad cops or chasing down demonstrators or arresting a 17-year-old with a gun. That's not how it's going to change. It's going to change in our hearts and in the home communities where we have the most influence.
That is a very, very interesting parallel that you just drew. I mean, in the current circumstances that we're finding ourselves, what does get lost a lot of times is the continued anti-Semitism that has plagued this country and the world for so many times. The anti-Muslim attitudes and practices that have gone on. What as a Jewish man, a rabbi, what can we learn from the Jewish narrative to help us understand what we need to be doing as a people of faith to tackle these great evils that have existed in our world and really tangible ways that we can come together?
That's an intriguing question, Mitch. I began saying shortly after September 11th, 2001, that the contribution that Jewish life had to the current zeitgeist at the time was that we had a vocabulary of tragedy that has been developed over 1,000 years, 1,500 years of conflict that enables us to deal with unexpected loss. I'm not sure that the fact that we have this history of being attacked and challenged gives us any special insight as to how to correct that problem for other people. because as the author Barry Weiss says, anti-Semitism is not a Jewish problem. It's a problem for anti-Semites. Racism is not a problem for Black people. It's a problem for racists.
Right.
And so if there's anything that we have to offer, and we're coming up on the Jewish holiday season right now, I'd suggest it's actually the faith message, which is not entirely possible with a lot of public Jews. They don't like to talk about their faith. They like to talk about their social justice commitments. But at this time of the year, we're asked to do an inventory of our souls and to take a look at what sins we've committed over the course of the past year, to, during this period leading up to the holidays, try to rectify them as best we can, especially by seeking out people who have been injured by our actions, and then to spend a very intense 10 days at the beginning of our new year resolving to do different and seeking the forgiveness of God. I think that's the mandate that humanity needs now, especially as they look at the Black community in the United States, for the United States' original sin of slavery, and for the aftermath of that, as we've tried to, as white people, make ourselves feel better about what we haven't corrected yet.
Yeah. You know, I've been talking more and more to people about this issue and trying to frame it around and I mean this in the very broadest of sense, a white supremacy problem. That, and I could even add to that, it's a white Christian supremacy problem that we have faced in this country. And what I mean by that is that, you know, you look at the founding of the United States and who came over here, and yes, they fled religious persecution, but I think it was Roger Williams who said, you know, he left one shore of persecution to land on the shores of another persecution.
Yeah.
And we see it, you know, just how the country was founded by the stealing and raping of the land from indigenous people, and then the need of a labor force. So obviously they brought slaves over, enslaved an entire race of people. And it was all built around this theological and political ideology that God had somehow set them apart from everybody else. And It's really damning. And we still, I think, are facing the ramifications of that attitude even today when we talk about, you know, I love this country. I don't want to necessarily live in any other country. But when we talk about American exceptionalism, it's not, it's addressed in a manner, framed in a manner that we are somehow better in the eyes of God than anybody else.
We have tried to deal with American exceptionalism by pretending that it doesn't have anything to do with race and that it doesn't have anything to do with the shortcomings of our country. And I'm with you. I choose to live in the United States. There are other places I could go, including a place where I'm constantly invited to be a part of a Jewish political society. But I choose to live here because for whatever shortcomings there have been in the history of the United States, this still is a beacon of light and hope to our citizens and to people around the world as well. Mm-hmm. And so what we have to be very careful of is not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. The American dream that we promote may not be as available to everybody as it should be, but that doesn't mean we should suggest that it's a zero-sum game, that we can't bring everybody into that dream, and therefore we have to take it away from everybody else. There's a process here, and it requires a reckoning for people who have taken advantage too much, and some sort of recompense for those who have been denied those opportunities.
Well said. Well, each and every week, Rabbi, we've got one final question that we pose to our guest, and Autumn always gets the privilege of asking that question. So, Autumn, take it away.
Absolutely. So our tagline at Good Faith Media is "There's more to tell." So in light of everything we've talked about today, what is your more to tell?
It's a great question. So I'll choose to take this in a personal sense rather than an organizational sense, and say the more to tell is that I am astounded, having just turned 68 years old, at how much more I have to learn and how much more I hope to grow. And opportunities to work with groups like Good Faith Media make it possible for me to begin to realize that.
I love that. I mean, so often, I was telling somebody the other day, Rabbi, that the older I get, the more questions I have. That I always love to learn and to discover new things and discover new things about new people in my life. So that was very well said. Thank you for sharing that.
My lifelong aspiration was to see the Cubs in the World Series. And now that has finally been accomplished, I can focus on other less important things in the world.
Oh, wow. That was there's a lot of people, waiting for that to happen. So, well, good. Well, again, thank you, Rabbi Jack Moline from Interfaith Alliance, for being our guest at Good Faith Weekly on the podcast. Want to know more about Interfaith Alliance? Go to interfaithalliance.org and, make a donation, get involved in their work, because it is a great, great organization. And what I failed to say at the beginning of this, Rabbi Moline is also part of our board at Good Faith Media, and we appreciate his involvement each and every time.
Proudly so.
Well, thank you. Well, thank you,
Autumn and Mitch.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as always, we want to thank our listeners for tuning in this week, and we wish you good faith.